Okay, so you know when you picture Florida in your mind, you think of Spanish colonial history.
Yeah.
Like St. Augustine, the oldest city founded by Europeans in the U.S.
Right.
It just feels
Yeah.
distinctly Spanish. But what if I told you
Uh,
that archaeologists working there
Yeah.
have dug up something a little surprising?
Mm.
It's a connection
Yeah.
to British rule in Florida.
Interesting.
It's unexpected,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what we're going to be looking into today.
I'm intrigued.
So we're going to be doing a deep dive into the discovery of a British redoubt unearthed in St. Augustine.
Fascinating.
And the article that we're going to be looking at today comes from Heritage Daily,
Great.
and it details the recent findings by the City of St. Augustine Archaeology Program.
Cool.
And our goal today is to explore the significance of this find and kind of illuminate this kind of lesser-known chapter in Florida's history.
Yeah, no, that's a really cool choice.
However, the British, who we usually think of as being further north.
Right, yeah, up in like the New England area.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How did they end up in Florida? What was going on?
Well, to understand that, we have to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the bigger picture of what was happening globally in the mid-18th century.
Okay.
And the 7 Years' War, which was this massive conflict between Britain, France, and Spain, had huge ripple effects across the world. And this is where Florida comes in.
Okay. Interesting.
So the Treaty of Paris in 1763, which officially ended the 7 Years' War, saw Spain ceding Florida to Great Britain.
Wow.
Now, this wasn't just a straightforward takeover, though. It was actually a strategic exchange. Britain gave back Havana in Cuba and Manila in the Philippines back to Spain in exchange for Florida.
Wow, that's a big swap.
Huge, yeah.
So essentially they traded Florida for Havana and Manila. And this is after centuries of Spanish rule.
I know, it's wild, right?
Yeah.
It's like almost overnight, Florida becomes this British territory.
I wonder what the people living there were thinking.
I know, it must have been pretty shocking.
Yeah.
So for the next 2 decades, from 1763 to 1783, Florida was under British rule. St. Augustine became a British administrative center.
Interesting.
And a guy named James Grant IV of Ballinalloch was appointed as the British governor.
Got it.
It's interesting, though, like 20 years is a relatively short period of time, right?
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of history.
Yeah.
Which is probably why this era doesn't get as much attention when we think about Florida's past.
Right. It's overshadowed by those longer periods of Spanish and American rule.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the evidence.
Yeah.
What exactly did these archaeologists find?
Okay, so in the Lincolnville neighborhood of St. Augustine, archaeologists from the city's archaeology program, they've been doing these excavations.
Yeah.
And they've unearthed something really cool.
What's that?
It's a defensive dry moat.
A moat?
A moat.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and this isn't just any old ditch. When they analyzed it, they realized it was part of a British redoubt.
Oh, so a redoubt.
Yeah.
Now, I think for some of our listeners out there, they might not be familiar with military history.
Right.
So what exactly is a redoubt? What did it look like?
Sure. So a redoubt is basically like a fortified military outpost. It's a self-contained defensive structure.
Got it.
And it's designed to protect troops and key positions.
Okay.
And in this case, the article says this particular redoubt was part of a whole network of these fortifications that were built along the western edge of St. Augustine back in 1781.
So a whole line of defense.
Yeah, and the dry moat that they found, it would have been there to slow down enemy infantry.
Oh, I see.
Make it harder for them to attack.
So it would force them into certain areas.
Exactly. It would channel them into where the defenders were strongest.
That's really clever.
Yeah, pretty smart. Yeah.
So we had these old maps and historical accounts that hinted at these redoubts.
Right.
But this is like the first actual physical proof.
I know. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that we found in the ground.
Yeah, it's like having a suspicion and then finally getting that confirmation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what does this physical evidence tell us?
Well, it's like the historical records and maps, they gave us a general idea.
Yeah.
But now with this archaeological discovery, we have undeniable physical confirmation.
Right.
It's not just speculation anymore.
Yeah.
And it lets us be much more precise about the location, size, and even the techniques they use to build these defenses.
So we're getting a much clearer picture.
Exactly. And the city archaeologist Andrea White, She said something really interesting.
What was that?
She said, quote, "That's what's interesting about these British redoubts. They're the only defenses that the British built themselves," end quote.
Mm.
That's a really key point.
It is.
Because it suggests that the British had their own distinct way of doing things.
Right.
They didn't just take over the existing Spanish fortifications and make do.
Yeah.
They actually built their own defenses from scratch.
So they really had their own ideas about strategy and defense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They were adapting to the specific threats and the terrain that they encountered in Florida.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's like they were saying, hey, we need to do this our way to be effective here.
It really highlights their presence there as a distinct military power.
Absolutely.
But, of course, as we've talked about, this British rule, it wasn't permanent.
No, it wasn't.
So how did it all come to an end?
Well, so after the American Revolution, they signed another Treaty of Paris in 1783.
Another one.
Another one, yeah.
Wow.
And this treaty was a big deal because it officially recognized the independence of the 13 colonies as the United States of America.
Birth of a nation.
Exactly. Yeah. And as part of this agreement, Britain had to give Florida back to Spain.
Oh, so they lost their foothold there.
They did,
So after just 20 years.
Yeah, it was a short-lived chapter.
The British chapter in Florida and St. Augustine.
It was over.
It came to a close.
Yeah, just like that.
So why is it important to dig into this seemingly small detail?
You know, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Because on the surface, it might seem insignificant. 20 years compared to centuries of Spanish and later American influence.
Right.
But this discovery is actually really important for a couple of reasons.
Okay, I'm listening.
First of all, it gives us concrete archaeological evidence for a period of British presence that often gets overlooked when people think about Florida's history.
Yeah, they tend to jump right from the Spanish to the American.
Exactly. And this discovery brings that British period out of the history books and into a tangible reality.
Right. It's not just words on a page anymore.
Exactly. We can actually touch this history.
It's right there under our feet.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, it makes it so much more real.
And second, this discovery shows just how important archaeology is.
Right.
You know, we had those maps and documents that hinted at these redoubts.
Wow.
But it's the excavation that gives us that irrefutable proof.
That 100% certainty.
Right. And it also lets us learn more about the specifics of these defenses.
Right. The details we wouldn't have known otherwise.
And, you know, thinking about it more broadly, this reminds us that history isn't always just about the big, powerful empires. You know, there are these shorter, less prominent periods of influence that can be just as fascinating.
They're like hidden chapters.
Exactly. And they can teach us a lot about strategic shifts and the ways different cultures interacted.
It makes you wonder how often we miss those hidden chapters.
Yeah, it's like we're so focused on the main storyline that we forget to look for those little side plots.
But those side plots can be just as interesting.
Sometimes even more so.
That's like those bonus features on a DVD.
Right.
That's a great analogy.
Sometimes they're the best part.
Exactly.
And it's like you were saying before.
Yeah.
You know, you think of St. Augustine.
Yeah.
And you immediately think of Spanish heritage.
Right. Centuries of it.
But then you find this physical evidence of British military strategy.
Right in the heart of the city.
It really challenges those initial assumptions.
It does.
And adds a whole new layer of complexity to the story.
It's like finding a secret passage.
Yeah.
In a familiar house.
Exactly. You think you know a place and then bam.
You find a whole new room.
There's a whole other story hidden there.
Yeah. And it's like this global conflict.
The 7 Years' War.
Yeah, it had a direct impact on this local community.
And a physical impact, too.
Yeah, it's not just an abstract idea anymore.
Exactly, you can see it.
You can touch it.
It's right there in the ground.
So we started this deep dive.
Yeah.
Looking at what seemed like a small archaeological find.
Just a little moat.
Right.
But look where it's taken us.
It's opened up this window.
A whole new perspective.
Into a part of Florida's past.
That we often forget about.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history is full of these layers.
And surprises.
Yeah, these unexpected connections.
It's like a puzzle.
With pieces we're still putting together.
And who knows what other pieces are out there waiting to be found.
That's what makes it so exciting.
Exactly. It keeps us asking questions.
And searching for answers.
That's a never-ending journey.
On that note, here's a final thought for our listeners.
I'm ready.
We've been talking about this British footprint in a Spanish city.
Yeah, a very unexpected discovery.
So it makes you wonder how many other historical narratives,
those
stories we think we know so well, might have similar hidden chapters.
Oh, I like that.
periods where different cultures or empires had an influence that we've just forgotten about.
Or that have been overshadowed by the dominant narrative.
Exactly. So what other assumptions about history,
yeah,
not just in Florida,
right, anywhere in the world,
might be challenged by new discoveries?
That's the question, isn't it?
It really makes you wonder what else is out there waiting to be found.
It's exciting to think about.
It is, and that's what makes history so fascinating.
Absolutely. There's always something new to learn.
Always another mystery to uncover.
And that's what keeps us coming back for more.
And that's what keeps us diving deeper.
Exactly.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and who knows what amazing discoveries you might make.
I'll be right here with you every step of the way.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Until then, happy digging.